Hi, it's Becca and welcome back to my channel. This video will be all about making sense of percentages, and we will cover why are percentages useful, how can we visualize them, how can we work out percentages of amounts, and how do we work out percentage increase and decrease. Hopefully by the end of the video you'll have a better conceptual understanding and feel more confident with these percentage skills. So why are percentages useful? Well, they're everywhere and they help us make sense of the world by showing part of a whole. Rental yield percentages tell us what share of a property's value you'd earn back in rent every year. On UK food labels, percentages show how much of your daily recommended limit is in a product, which helps you compare choices quickly. And in football, ball possession is shown as a percentage, so we can easily compare how much control each team had, even if the game includes extra time. So from shopping and savings to tax, wages and statistics in sport or health, percentages help us compare, calculate and understand information clearly. Next, let's think about how we can visualize percentages. And first, we need to know that percent basically translates to out of every 100 or per 100. So we're talking about proportion where 100 represents the whole and then percentage represents part of that whole. We've got here a grid which is 10 by 10, so 100 small squares, and the whole thing is shaded, so that represents 100%. And we can look at some other visual representations. And the main thing with these is to just get a sense of how much is shaded. So kind of what are we talking in comparison with the whole. So on this first diagram, we can see we've got hardly anything shaded. So that's quite a kind of a small percentage. And then in the next one, maybe we'd say that's sort of around half of it is shaded. And the last one, we can see nearly the whole thing is shaded, so that's quite a high percentage, kind of almost 100%. Another really useful way to visualize percentages is to think about batteries, or the battery symbols that we have on our phones or other devices, which show us how charged the battery is. So if we know that 100% is a full battery, let's just take a minute to estimate how charged up these 4 batteries are here. So perhaps take just a minute to pause the video and have a think, and then play again when you're ready to see my estimates. Okay, so here are mine. I put for the first one 85%, and the second one I put 30%. The third one I thought looked around half full, so I put 50%, and for the last one I put 5%. And as I said, these are just estimates, but it helps to understand what we mean by a percentage and think about the proportion. The main thing is to remember that 100% is the whole thing. And for the rest of the video, we're going to be using a bar like this one here to represent 100% and think about different percentages. Let's now look at 2 side-by-side examples to illustrate how percentages work. So in example 1, this bar is going to be worth 80. If you want to make that more concrete, you could think of it as £80 or 80 people or 80 cars. And that represents 100%. So 80 is a whole, that's the whole thing. In the next bar, I'm going to split it in half or into 50%. So we're going to split 80 in half, which is 40 and 40. And then in the third bar, we're going to split those in half again, so into quarters, which is 25%, and that would be 20. So 25% of 80 would be 20. On the next diagram, let's say that the whole bar represents 500. We're going to use the same percentages, but using a different number. So again, 500 is 100% of 500. Let's do 50% again, but this time that 50%, that proportion will be 250. That's 500 split in half. And again, let's split it into quarters or 25%, and that's going to be 125. So we can see that even though we've used the same percentages or the same proportion, the values are different because we started with a different number at the beginning. Let's now build up our skills in working out percentages of amounts, and we'll start with this question: work out 60% of 90. So we're starting out with 90. The whole bar here is going to represent 90. That's 100%. And we need to find 60%. So I'm going to link here my video on useful fractions and percentages conversions, kind of demonstrated in a visual way. But I'm also just going to put this table here to help me work out some of those useful percentages of amounts. So I'm going to think of this as kind of building blocks. So how can I build up 60% using some of those percentages from the table? So one way I could do it is I could start off with 50%, which is the same as a half. So a half of 90 is 45. And then I need another 10%, which is the same as a tenth. So I'm going to divide by 10, which will give me 9. And then to work out 60%, I will add those together. 45 plus 9 gives me 54. Another way I could think of it is I could think of 60% as 6 lots of 10%. So each 10% is a tenth of 90, so that's worth 9. And I'm going to need 6 of those. So I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That makes up 60% altogether. And I'm going to do 9 lots of 6, which is 54, or 6 lots of 9, which is 54. So I get the same answer, just shows that I can do it in different ways. So we're going to move on to another example, but remember this question because we're going to refer back to it in a little bit, just to look at a different skill. Let's do another example, which is work out 36% of 140. So this time the whole bar is worth 140, that's 100%, and we want to find 36%. So here's my table to help. Again, we're going to use our building blocks to think, how can we make up 36%? I'm going to start off with 3 lots of 10%, so that's 10, 20, 30%. Now I'm going to do 5%, which is half of 10%, so that's going to be 7, and I need 1% extra, which is quite tricky to show on this diagram. That's the same as 100, so I'm going to divide by 100, which is 1.4. Then I can add them all together, so I've got 14 plus 14 plus 14 plus 7 plus 1.4, which gives us 50.4. Or another way I could think of that is to do 3 lots of 14, then add the 7 plus 1.4, which gives me 50.4. I just want to go back a minute to that initial percentages of amounts question we did, which was work out 60% of 90, because we can link it to another percentage skill. And I'm just going to show you how that works. So if we are working out 60% of 90, another way we could think of it is that we are keeping 60%. What are we getting rid of? Well, if the whole thing is 100%, that means we would be getting rid of 40% or reducing it by 40%. So we're taking that off. So this question, work out 60% of 90, is the same as the question decrease 90 by 40%. So we can do 2 skills in one. So if we know that we are keeping 60%, that's the same as reducing it by 40%. So now I'm going to give another example of that percentage decrease and compare it with a different method. So we'll use the question decrease 80 by 40%. So our first method is, if we are taking off 40%, what percentage are we keeping? So if I start with 100% and I take away 40%, I'm going to be left with 60%. So my first method is to work out 60% of 80, because that's what I'm keeping. So we're going to take off the 40%. We're left with 60%. So we think, right, how can we build that up? So again, I'm going to go 50%, which is a half, so that'll be 40. And then an extra 10%, which would be 8. And then altogether, that's going to give me 48. And we could also do it thinking about 6 lots of 10%. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that makes up 60%, just in a different way. And again, if I do those 6 lots of 8, that's going to give me 48. So same answer. So this is one method. Let's look at another method, which is more of a sort of textbook method, what we're taught in school, which is to work out 40% of 80 and then take it away from 80, from 100%. So this time we've still got 80 as the whole. I'm going to work out 40%, so I'm going to do that 4 lots of 10%, which is 32, and then I'm going to take that away from 80, which leaves me with 48. So we get the same answer, but just 2 different ways of thinking about it. Last skill we're going to look at is percentage increase, and we'll use this question: increase 32 by 30%. So here's my table again, just to help out if needed. And my whole bar this time is worth 32, that's 100%, and we're going to add on an extra 30% to that. So I'm going to think about my building blocks, how can I build up 30%? And I'm going to do 3 lots of 10%. And I know that 10% is the same as a tenth, so to work that out, I would do divide by 10, which gives me 3.2. Another way of thinking about this is it's 130% of 32. So we're starting out with 100%, and then we're adding something extra on. So it's going to be, the answer is going to be bigger than 32. So I now just need to add all those things together. So I've got my 32, and then I'm going to add 3.2, 3.2, another 3.2, and that gives me 41.6. Or I could also think of it as 32, add 3 lots of 3.2, which gives me 41.6, and that is how we do a percentage increase. So now that we've covered those skills, let's have some time for practicing them. So I'm going to put up 3 questions. Find 21% of 600, reduce 40 by 35%. You could use either one of the 2 methods we looked at, and then increase 70 by 15%. And you don't need to use sort of neatly drawn diagrams. You can just draw something that looks like this if it's helpful for you, just to kind of visualize and add structure to your work. But pause the video here and play when you're ready to go through the answers. Okay, so let's now go through some answers. Question 1, which was find 21% of 600. Here is my bar model, which shows I've got 2 lots of 10%, so that'll be 60, and then 1% of 600 would be 6, and then we add those together to get 126. Question 2 was reduce 40 by 35%, and one way we could think of that is that if we are removing 35%, we would be keeping 65%. So we could work out 65% of 40. As you can see on my bar model, I've broken that up to 50%, 10% and 5%, which would add up to 26. If you did it the other way, you might have worked out 35% of 40, which is 14, and then removed that from, or subtracted that from 40, which would also give you 26. And the last question, increase 70 by 15%. So as you can see here, we've got our original 70, that was 100%, and then I've added on an extra 10%, which would be 7, and 5%, which is half of that, so that would be 3.5, and then the total would be 80.5. So really well done if you had a go at those. I hope the bar models have been helpful in adding some more structure and sort of visual explanation to the answers. So that brings us to the end of this video. We've explored what percentages are, why they're useful, how to visualize them, and how to work out percentage of amounts, increases and decreases, plus how they show up in everyday life. My next percentage videos will look at using percentages in real life scenarios and worded exam problems, as well as using a calculator for percentage problems. Please like the video if you found it useful, and subscribe if you'd like to be notified about my upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.